Hey guys, Tom Baker from Chasing Cars here, working in the office today, but I thought I'd just jump on and drop a quick video on the channel to bring you guys up to speed on some developments, maybe we'd say bombshells, out of Hyundai's N Division this afternoon about some pretty tough decisions the company is having to make in the face of electrification and also a bunch of tough new European emissions laws that will start applying from about 2025. And that means that Hyundai is going to have to either upgrade or discontinue its well-loved, well-known halo models like the i20N, i30N, and Kona N. And the company has pretty much made the decision to discontinue almost all of them. In today's video, I'm going to tell you more about what this means and when we might see more affordable Hyundai N performance cars in the future. But don't worry, because there's one piece of good news, because Hyundai will be keeping one of its petrol-powered N cars around for a long time yet. I'm going to tell you which car that is in just a minute. If you guys mainly follow Chasing Cars over on our YouTube channel, you might not be aware of our website, chasingcars.com.au. We publish heaps of content on the site that doesn't necessarily make it to the channel, including and especially a whole bunch of car news. We've got really talented journos, and one of the topics we've been covering today has been Hyundai's major news about how it's going to deal with electrification and the fact that emissions laws are making its cars much more expensive. So get on over to chasingcars.com.au to check out all the detail, but I'll give you a rundown now about what it all means. So this whole sorry story really starts with the European Union, which has been aggressively legislating new emissions laws for a long time now, more than a decade, which basically limits the amount of carbon dioxide cars are allowed to emit for every kilometre of driving they do. Now in Australia, we don't have any emissions regulation like this. We might see it in Australia in future, but we still get affected by it because even though Australia is not part of the European Union, we're a very small market. Only 1 million new cars are sold in Australia per year. Europe, 6 million new cars are sold per year. America, 17 million new cars. So basically, as a tiny market, the laws that come into force in other places, especially the EU, they really affect what cars end up getting developed and built. And that means that for Hyundai, where Europe is actually one of its biggest markets for performance cars, if Germany and France and the EU bring in new emissions laws, that's likely to affect what us Australians can get. And that's what they're doing. So 2025 is going to be a set of new emissions laws called Euro 7, which tighten the rules even further and make it really hard for car manufacturers to sell vehicles that are not hybrid and especially that are not fully electric. And part of that problem is that all of the Hyundai N cars have really cool, powerful turbo petrol engines. They're not hybrids. They emit a lot of CO2 and other harmful gases, which means that they're going to cop big fines in Europe. So for Hyundai, they don't want to pay those fines. So instead, the plan is to just discontinue the cars. Now, Europe is the main focus for the Hyundai i20 N, their entry-level hot hatch, which is 35 grand here in Australia, the i30 N hatchback, which costs from 46 grand in Australia, and also the Kona N SUV, which is a bit more expensive than that and a little bit more rare. Europe is the main focus for these cars. They were developed in Europe, mainly at the Nürburgring, by a bunch of people that used to work for BMW, and so all those people are now pretty sad at the prospect of these cars having to be killed off. Why do they have to be killed off? Well, if Hyundai keeps selling them, then they have to sell hundreds, thousands of EVs in order to make up the difference and avoid paying the EU big fines for emitting too much CO2. That's basically the long and short of it. And that's why Hyundai N Division has been fervently developing the Ioniq 5 N EV, and there'll also be an Ioniq 6 N EV in future and plenty of others as well. But the i20N, i30N hatch and Kona N with their petrol engines, they won't be able to stick around if the EU goes ahead and implements this law. There's still a chance that they won't, but it's very, very, very likely that it will, and mid-2025 is the crunch point where these cars could basically no longer be sold. And if they can't be sold in Europe, they're not going to remain in production just for Australia. That just won't happen. The problem here is that the i30N hatch, the Kona N, and the i20N are either not sold in America or barely sold in America. The Kona is, but it's not popular. We need a car that is popular in America and has decent chance of success in America. And that's why the one petrol-powered Hyundai N car that will be sticking around for Australia is the i30 Sedan N, which is called the Elantra N in the US and the Hyundai N in South Korea. So while this is actually the least popular, I think, of the Hyundai N cars currently sold in Australia, at the very least it's the one with the shortest wait times if you sign up to buy one now. The i30 Sedan N will be the only car that's guaranteed to stick around for Australia for many years to come. Now, at the moment, the i30 Sedan N has a 2-litre turbo petrol engine, 206 kilowatts of power, LSD on the front end, a choice of manual or auto for the same price, $50,200, and it actually does drive really nicely. I've enjoyed driving the i30 Sedan N. Interestingly, totally different car underneath to the i30 N hot hatch, the one that's going away. Now, the i30 Sedan N sells kind of well in America. It's predicted that it's going to sell better in America in future years, and that's why Hyundai is going to keep investing in it. In fact, it's going to get an all-new generation, which is kind of a surprise. It might even get an engine change. I sat down over the weekend with Albert Biermann, the great man himself, and he indicated that they've been looking at some new engines for the car. They're certainly going to do a new generation of i30 Sedan N or Elantra N, so that's good news for petrol heads. But as for the i20 N, i30 N hatch, and Kona N, almost certain that those cars will be discontinued in the next kind of 2 years as these European Union regulations start to really bite. However, Hyundai N is going to release its premium EVs over the next couple of years. The Ioniq 5N and Ioniq 6N, they're beasts. 430 kilowatts of power, rear biased all-wheel drive, fully electric, $100,000 price tag most likely. But Hyundai is not going to forget its roots. Albert Biermann says that N Division is still interested in building an affordable N EV, which is great. So i20N, if that comes back, it's probably going to come back as a 400-volt electric car, a little bit more compromised, perhaps a bit shorter range, not as good thermal management. But the i30N, well, we think that's going to come back as a full EV on an 800-volt architecture, which is the crown jewel of Hyundai's EVs. It's what's used under the Ioniq 5. That gives you ultra-rapid charging, but more importantly, it's a lot better for track use. The cooling they can build into it, the premium tier batteries they use for it, the awesome motors that are compatible with it, all of these components are better for track use than what Hyundai think they could do with a 400-volt EV. So the i20N EV, nice and affordable, still really small, great option as a starter pack hot hatch in the electric age. The i30N EV, though, sounds like it could be something really special, you know, up there with, or more than the Cupra Born as a proper, probably rear-wheel drive hot hatch with a really great battery, awesome motors, sophisticated chassis, and actually designed to be used on the track. All of that sounds pretty exciting to me, but when would this stuff arrive? Probably not until after 2025, which is when these EU laws are slated to come into force. The i30 Sedan N, or Elantra N, is going to be kept going until the EVs can take over, basically. So I think sometime between 2025 and 2030 is pretty realistic for when Hyundai could get an affordable N Division electric hot hatch onto the market, and they might even have two. Because if I was Hyundai, I would not want to throw away famous names like i30N and i20N. You know, they've carved out a cult following in just 5 years. It's crazy how quick Hyundai N has come along. And if I was that company, I wouldn't want to throw away that legacy just because we've got to move to electrification. You know, i30, it's a good name. If I were them, I'd want to keep it. And from the sounds of my interview with Albert Biermann, he understands that, Hyundai acknowledges that, and the plan is not just to sell $100,000 EVs, the plan is to bring affordable models back in time, but they're not ready straight away. It's not happening in the next year or two. So that's all the news that's out today about Hyundai, about electrification, what's coming, what's staying, and what's probably going. You can read all the detail and all the reasons why on chasingcars.com.au, but I'm very keen to know your perspective, so drop me a comment down below this video. I'll try and come back to all of them. While you're there, please hit subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.